Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea is an OSR game system like no other. With a unique twist on world building, a crunchy combat system, and so much more, this weird fantasy game system is a great way to live out your Conanian adventures with a bit of a strange twist. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to No Fun Allowed, and today we're going to be taking a look at what is Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. An extremely long name, a lot of people just simply shorten it down to being Ash. But what is this game system? First off, this system is great art, because look at that front cover there. Fan-frickin-tastic stuff. But what is this game system exactly? It's not exactly a full-on retro clone, because there is a lot of elements in here that we'll be getting into that are unique in and of itself. But as you'll be able to tell, this is an OSR system like many others. So as we can see here, as we're slowly panning through, the art. This art really sells it, right? This is an alien world. So as we'll be getting into with that world building element here, when we play most OSR game systems, they are typically of a low fantasy setting, and they are typically in, I don't know, around the 1000s-ish or the 1200s-ish, somewhere around there. But this game is not like that at all. This is not taking place in something that's even remotely close to our world. This is taking place on a floating rock in the middle of space, and you'll be able to see all the weird eldritch elements and all the weird alien elements and all that fun stuff. So first off, we are looking at the second edition of Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. There was a first edition, and there was a whole bunch of little things about it, and there was the second edition, which is out right now, and they are planning on doing a third edition Kickstarter fairly soon here. This one tome that we're looking at is 600 plus pages. Absolutely massive. And that covers all the player stuff, it covers all of the GM stuff, it covers all the world building stuff, it covers it all. So I won't be going too far into the world building stuff, but we will be looking at what makes the player characters unique, and we will be looking at some of the fun GM elements here. Once again, looking at some of the excellent art there, really selling the world. I mean, come on now, we get weird cultist stuff going on, we get a roper, we get the fun usual stuff. We get the classic Fords and all that stuff, but as we'll be getting into, look at that. Once again, just being bombarded by the art. Look at that master table of contents. We get a whole bunch of stuff here. Won't be getting into all of it, but we will be getting into a lot of it. So first things first, we're going to be looking at what makes characters special in this game. First off, we get required materials on making characters, and we get the conventional dice mechanics on rolling for characters. You can roll the traditional 3d6, or you can do 4d6, drop the lowest. You know, just a whole bunch of different variations on that. But here is where we get the actual character creation. Attributes: class, race, physique, alignment, background, weapon skill, coinage and equipment, other statistics, and spells. The attributes are, if you come to know them, you know what's up. You've got the rolling for all your stuff here. But here is where we start to see this game truly diverge from a lot of the more rules light systems. We can see here that with all this fun stuff, we get, okay, if you have a strength score of 14, that gives you a plus nothing to the melee attack, but it does give you a plus 1 to the damage. And if you need to do a test of strength, then you have a 3 in 6 chance if you have a 50-50. And then we can see all those different variations. What's really unique about this system is every single one of your statistics has an extraordinary feat of da-da-da. So right here, we have, as an 18, you have a 32% chance. If a boulder is coming down on top of you and you have to absolutely thrust the thing out of the way or you're going to fall off the ledge, roll me an extraordinary feat of strength. And only the strongest of people would actually be able to survive that. You know, really cool stuff. And of course, as we get into, we can see there, you know, it gives you all the details of what you're going to need. And you can start to see, of course, why this tome is, 600 pages. It's just so incredibly long. And also very important is the classic stuff here. That wisdom giving you more spells, and your charisma, adjusting your henchman loyalty, and all that great stuff. The classes are one of the more unique aspects of this game. It has the classic 4. We have the fighter, the magician, the cleric, and the thief. And as we're getting into, they stand out differently from a lot of the normal stuff. First off being, you have to have a 9 in a prime attribute there, their attribute requirement. We have the fighter with a 9 strength, and they get a d10 hit die. They can use all of the weapons and armors, but here is where we start to see something. Saving throw modifiers, +2 to death and a +2 to transformation. So we'll be seeing a whole bunch of cool charts here that really help flesh out the world, and we'll be taking a look at the character sheet as well. But every single one of your saving throws right from the beginning, you have to have a 16 in order to succeed in it. So the fighter, if you are subject to a save versus poison, then it's going to have to be a 16. But if it is a save versus death, you add a +2 to that, meaning that you really only have to roll a 14. Pretty cool. And here is, of course, where we see the traditional stuff here. We see, okay, you need 2000 XP to level up, and they get 1d10 hit die. The fighting ability there, that is something that's going to be very important because this is a THAC0 system. So you're going to take your fighting ability, and when you roll, you're going to apply it against the opponent's AC, and you're going to be able to see what's up. But here as well is where we're seeing really what the core of the game is about. At the beginning of the game, your character is a nobody, but you eventually become somebody. And at 9th level, you are attracting armies to your side. You can see here that once you build that stronghold, you're going to get 140 some odd people showing up to be your soldiers. And then you get to control the land, and everybody pays 5 silver pieces. That's really cool. Also, something unique about this game system that separates it from other OSR systems is the fact that you get multiple attacks. So right from the get-go, and you have an attack rate of 1-to-1. You attack once every single round. But then as you progress, you get an attack of 3-2. What does a 3-2 mean? That means you attack once one round and then twice the next round, and etc., etc. Also really cool is that the fighter in particular can deal a whole bunch of more attacks if dealing with a whole bunch of chumps, a whole bunch of really great stuff. The magician, the classic, you need a d4 for the intelligence. They get different saving throws. What is nice is that the magician can use darts, quarterstaff, and sling, and a dagger. So they're not just standing in the back doing nothing. They can at least be hurling some darts and slings while they're leveling up. We get the cleric as well. The cleric being the typical cleric individual. You get the d8 of the hit points. You get a whole bunch of different spell slots. You get a whole bunch of this and that. You get the thief, and the thief is, of course, the person that levels up the fastest, and they get their own unique little chart in regards of how they approach it. What I do like here is that it's not a D100 system. Very, very simple. It is a D12 system, and you can see right from the get-go there, you are good at some things, and you are not actually able to actually perform some things. Like, you cannot perform a read scroll here. But what's really unique is, as we can see here, decipher script. You start off with a 0 in 12 chance of succeeding in it, but this is affected by your stats. So we can see here that some of your thief skills are determined by your dexterity, your intelligence, and your wisdom. I really like that. That applies to the character over time, and we can see here that you start off with an already 8 in 12 chance of succeeding on a climb check, but if you have a high dex, then guess what? It's going to be that much better. Pretty cool stuff. And here is where we get into another unique aspect of this, subclasses. So it says specifically that they are subclasses, but you might be thinking of it in a more normal sense of a subclass is you level up in a class and then you specialize. That is not the case in here. These subclasses are just classes that you would take right at level 1, right from the beginning. As we'll be getting into, these classes are vastly different from their core classes. We have the fighter subclasses, and we can take a look at the cataphract. In the magician subclass, you have the normal person, but you also have the witch. You have the cleric, but guess what? You also have the monk. So we're going to be taking a look at the contrast between the two. Let's start off with the cataphract, one of my favorites. So the cataphract normally looks exactly like the fighter, except for several key notes here. One, they have far more required stats. So they need a strength of 9, a dex of 9, a wisdom of 9, and a charisma of 9. And then, of course, they also have different XP thresholds for leveling up, and they get different abilities. So we'll be getting into, there is not a necessarily just a flat upgrade, right? So you need to have those stats in the first place. But even if you do have those stats, there is the possibility that you choose not to become a specialized character. You could just be some of those core classes because maybe you wanted to just level up in the core class because of the XP requirement, or maybe because if you have the prime attributes in that one particular thing, you're going to level up even quicker because you have a bonus to XP. So this and that, stuff like that. We'll take a look at some of the other classes too. We get some Paladin. So Paladin is a very unique one. They are one of the hardest classes to become. 9 strength, 9 dex, 9 wisdom, 15 charisma. If you're only rolling 3d6, that's really hard to become. But as we'll be getting into, that's pretty dope if you become a Paladin because, yeah, it sucks that you take a little bit longer to level up, but you get some cool abilities. You can sense evil, and you've got healing hands, and you get these righteous wrath, and you get a sacred mount. And once you reach that high enough level, people are going to flock to you, and you're going to have a whole bunch of cool bannermen. You know, the usual, typical fun stuff. The Ranger, oh my goodness. What I really like about this is how flavorful a lot of the classes and subclasses are. In particular, the Warlock. So the Warlock is the Gish of all of these classes. And also something you might be noting is if you are a veteran of the OSR, you see that we have classes race. We're going to be getting into later why there is, so far, no elves or no orcs or no anything of that nature. So the Warlock in particular, I really like because the Warlock is a fighter that actually gets some spellcasting. And we can see here that they require a 12 in strength and a 12 in intelligence. But if they want to become a Death Soldier, a Fire Lord, or an Ice Lord, they need a 12 wisdom. Really, really cool stuff there. And, you know, just really unique. The fact that this is like supposedly a subclass, but this subclass alone has subclasses in its subclass. Really interesting. So it's in the Magician here where we can also see some stark contrast is we have a Cryomancer. You'll never guess what they get up to. And we get, an Illusionist. You'll never guess what kind of spells they're casting. And we get the Necromancer. You know, just the traditional stuff here, but I really like the fact that there is these specialized casters instead of it just being everyone is the same caster, but then they specialize depending on what kind of spells that they take. That makes them feel unique, it makes them different, and you're going to have a lot of replayability because there's so many different classes in this whole thing. Also, a really cool one here, Pyromancer, you know, just the typical stuff. You know, just to make sure to show off what makes a Pyromancer special is, look at that, they get a candle. Once per day, a level of experience, evoke a heatless candle-like flame, rise from the palm. It sheds 15-foot radius because, hey, you're going to need light at some point. Class I really like is the Witch. The Witch stands out on her own because not only do they get to brew potions and poisons, but they get familiars. And familiar is actually something I really want to show off here. The Witch must make a death saving throw if the familiar is killed. A failed saving throw results in 3d6 HP of damage sustained. If the saving throw is failed by a margin of 5 or more, the Witch dies. So you cannot have a familiar just go down the hallway, trigger the trap, and say, haha, they didn't cost us any of our lives. No, because it can in fact cost the Witch their life. That is something really cool there. You know, you can't just be dumb. There is an actual, you know, connection and motivation behind the person that you've contacted with the familiar. We also get some really cool stuff here, like the Druid and, a Monk. You know, Monk, really unique one, because you think to yourself, okay, Cleric, how does the Monk pertain to that? Well, the Monk is actually really cool because the Monk doesn't actually deal with spell casting, but they do get a cool bit of AC bonus, and they can do some empty-handed damage. They get a damage bonus. Really cool here. On a natural 19 or 20 on an attack roll, a stunning blow is delivered. A small or medium creature must make a transformation saving throw or be stunned for 2d4 rounds. Huge, huge stuff. You know, just more and more of this variety here is what makes these classes so unique, and is going to make the reason why when you play this game and have a whole bunch of people roll up a bunch of different characters, it's going to be a unique experience every time. Another one being this Rune Graver here. They get rune levels, not spell levels. And what's really cool about that is they get these runes, but guess what? They have to carve this rune into their hand and let the blood flow, and that's when they can activate their spell. And you know, that's just such awesome imagery here. In fact, actually, I think there's a pretty awesome picture of it. Yes. So there is this Rune Graver who's getting assaulted by a whole bunch of scarab beetles, and they slash into their hand and invoke a rune. And let's say for this instance, they want to invoke a free surface. So they cut their hand, they hurt themselves real hard, but they cause this free surface all around and could potentially save their own lives by having all of these scarabs fall down to the ground. Really awesome stuff. Shaman, just more and more just awesome imagery here. And here we get the thief subclasses, we get the assassin, what the assassin does, they assassinate people. The bard, another really unique class and really hard to become because they need a 9 strength, dex, int, whiz, but a 15 charisma. Really, really hard stuff. They get some spell levels all over the place. They get some fun abilities where they get to interact with the world. A ledger menaced. Yes, we do have thieves that are casting spells as well. Really cool. So we get a thief that deals with cleric spell levels, and we get a thief that actually deals with some wizardy type spells as well. Really awesome. We also get a scout too. So here is where we see why we didn't see any elf or dwarf or gnome or whatever else. It is because in this world setting, it is humanocentric. There is only humans in this world. But the interesting thing here is we can look. We get Atlanteans, Amazons, Eskimo, Celt, Cimmerian, Common, Ixian, Viking Pict, Half-Blood Pict, and Hyperborean. So, as we'll be seeing here, the reason for that is because all of these people have been transported from our world into this strange, crazy land of Hyperborea, and they are now dealing with it. This has been quite some time, and your characters are just doing whatever it is that they need to do. Your characters aren't the ones that are first arrived here. They've been doing this for quite some time. But you can see here how this is a very, very old influence. We, of course, get, Vikings and Celts and all that fun stuff. That's really, really cool setting. But what are Hyperboreans? Hyperboreans are more native to this place, and they are the most alien, which is, of course, a fun contradiction in phrasing there because the Hyperboreans are more local to this place than everybody else. We can see here Physique. Physique is really cool because in this game, you're going to age out. As you do things in the world, your age is going to go up and up over time. And that's a big deal because if you start off the game as a young adult, then hey, that's cool. You are a young adult. But once you become an adult, you add 1 point to any attribute. And that's really cool. But then guess what? As you get middle-aged, you subtract 1 point from your strength and 1 point of dexterity and 1 point of constitution. But you add 1 point of intelligence and wisdom. As you get older, you get more frail, but you get more learned. And also the same thing happens when you're ancient. Really, really awesome stuff here. And you can see here for all others, which is almost every single race, you're going to age out around the same time. But Hyperboreans are a bit different. They're a lot longer lived. But they're also harder to become because on that roll of a 2d12, you only get them on a 24. And we also get this really fun thing on height and weight. This is your physique, right? So we can see here you roll 3d6. But the interesting thing here is depending on what race you are, that's going to be different. So if you're an Amazon man, you roll for the standard procedure. You just roll 3d6. But if you're an Amazon woman, you re-roll any ones on the 3d6 to determine for your height. That's awesome, right? The Amazonian women are on average going to be taller. And then we get the Eskimo. The Eskimo roll 46 for height determination and drop the highest die result. The Eskimo, on average, are going to be lower. Once again, just more and more really fun things on creating your characters. Also, you might have noticed on the classes there, classes were in fact determined by a cosmic sense of alignment. In this game, there are 5 alignments: lawful good, chaotic good, neutral, lawful evil, and chaotic evil. And, you can play those up as much as you desire because there are class restrictions based on those. The paladin has to be lawful good. If you're a certain kind of magic user, you cannot be good, etc., etc. We also get these fun languages here. Bunch of religions. All these religions are pertaining to the world. And we can see here that weird influence. We get some Cthulhu, and we get some Kraken, and we get, all this Viking stuff as well. Just really awesome stuff. Yig, Yunde, however you say it. We also get secondary skills. What was your person before they became an adventurer? I was a link boy. Okay, I want to be an adventurer. I don't want to be a link boy anymore. We also get weapon skill. So in this game, if you are not good with using a weapon, do not use it. If you are a magician of any repute, you're not going to touch any weapon because you will get a -4 to the attack, and that's going to pretty much guarantee that you're always going to miss, right? and etc. etc. Just don't use a weapon you're not proficient with. You can acquire new weapon skills, and we also get a weapon mastery table here, as we're going to see. This is where it's at. So we can see on this chart the attack rate. That's what I really like about this game system, is we get all these variances on the attack rate. If you have a 1/2, you only attack once every 2 rounds. But if you have an attack rate of 2/1, you attack twice every single round. That's going to really push the difference between all the martially inclined people and the non-martially inclined people. Really great. We also get the coinage, the typical affair. We get armor. So the armor, pretty simple here. We can see that this is just a typical THAC0 thing of AC of 9 is just when you're naked. But if you have a full plate of armor, then you have a 1. We can see here that we get also a damage reduction. So not only do you get a higher AC, or a lower AC, depending on how you're looking at it, but you also get a damage reduction. So if you are in full plate and someone hits you for 3 whole damage, then you only took 1 damage. Pretty cool. And also, really, really dope is shields. We get 3 different types of shields. We get a small shield, a large, and a 2-handed. And it's here where we also get the first instance of missile defense modifier. Because yes, if you are wearing armor, you get the typical AC, but there is a distinction between melee defense modifier and missile defense modifier. Over time, that's really awesome stuff. And here where we see the weapons. So with the weapons here, we get the typical affair. We get all of our swords and our shields and all that stuff. It tells us what the damage is. We get the variances of 1d4, 1d6, 1d8, 1d10, etc., etc. But the over number here, the WC, the weapon class, what that is a pretty much a telling of how big the weapon is. If you have a garrote, which is basically a string, then you have a weapon class of 0. But if you have a pike, then your weapon class is 6. If you are in combat and you are wielding a pike and you're going up against someone with a garrote, when they run up to you, you get an attack first. That's only for the first round, only when the combat first starts. But it is a very good distinction, because it makes absolutely no sense that if you have a pike, then someone could run up to you somehow holding a string in their hand, right? So that's a really nice distinction of the weapon classes there. And also, here is something I love about this game. This is what gives this game more crunch, is the fact that as you start looking at all these weapons, a lot of these weapons have a lot of unique traits to them. And we'll be seeing later on that there's also some things we can do with attacking that is unique to more than just I roll to attack. So first off, I want to show off the flail. Flails can bypass opponents' shields, negating AC bonuses derived therefrom. So that's really cool, right? So if you're using a typical weapon, then yeah, you just do what it is that you need to do. But if you have a flail, then that's going to be awesome against the person that has the shield. And if you have this garrote here, the garrote actually has a bunch of little special features tied behind it. And more as you look through here, there's a bunch of things that make swords special. And whatever else other weapons. But here as well, we also get missile weapons. We get the traditional bolas and darts, but we also get some cool things like boomerangs and stone and, just the typical stuff as well. And here we're going to be seeing all this fun gear. The gear, of course, is what really infers what you can actually do on an adventure. And oh my goodness, look at that. You want some barding for your horse or whatever? Get it. Oh, and by the way, there's woolly mammoths in this world, because of course. We also get a whole bunch of vehicles as well. And here also really unique is we get the quick start packages. So you could sit there and go through the minutia of just buying whatever gear that you need when you roll up your character, or you could simply just start off with one of these starting packs. These starting packs are pretty good, and they leave you with I believe a D4 plus 1 GP there. Pretty awesome. And that it goes for every single one of the classes. Great stuff. Here we get other statistics. We get told exactly what our casting ability is, fighting ability is, this and that. So this is a small table here on what the armor class is. And that will be useful for level 1 characters, and depending on how high your armor class is, or no, specifically your fighting ability is, that might be useful. But if you are of someone that is going to be a much higher fighting ability, then you're going to need the extended one, which we'll be seeing later on. But here in particular is where we see the saving throws. So like I said before, at level 1 to 2, you start off with a 16. You need to roll a 16 in everything. But every single class has that unique thing of, oh yeah, I got a +2 to these two things. Except for the Paladin. The Paladin had a +2 to literally every single saving throw, which is pretty dope. And you can see over time, as you level up, all of your saving throws do get better. You eventually, instead of having to roll a 16, you roll a 14, 13, 12, 11, etc., etc. And that was all for the character creation stuff here, but here we get into some spells. Spell casting is insanely dangerous in this world. There are spells which can immediately put you out of commission. And there are spells that are going to shape the world. But of course, the trade-off there is when you start off, you can barely cast any spells and you suck at them. But of course, as you level up over time, your spells are going to get disgusting. And what's really, really good here is there's just an absolute tremendous wealth of spells there. Look at that. A level 1 magician has 33 level 1 spells. 33. That's huge. There's an absolute ton. It's absolutely fantastic. And, just more and more things there. Just so many different spells here. In fact, as we scroll all the way through, because there's spells for every single one of the unique things here, let's take a look at, I don't know, let's do the classic, let's look for the Fireball, because the Fireball is always the scary one. Fireball, of course, harkens back to days of old. It does 1d6 point of damage per caster level. So if you are a 5th level whatever, then you do 5d6 points of damage. Incredibly scary in this game. Just the typical stuff here. Flaming Missile, Flame Blade, Flash. So you can see as you scroll through all these things, there is an absolute ton here. And they really do cater to whatever you are. So if you're the Pyromancer, then great, you get a whole bunch of cool things. You're the Cryomancer, great, you get a whole bunch of cool things. Absolutely great stuff. And also something I always love about all this stuff is, as we mentioned before, age is a big deal. We have the haste spell. The haste spell is incredibly ridiculous. It increases all of your attacks. But guess what? The recipient of haste are aged by 1 year as a result of this spell. So if you're running a campaign where is the typical, you go out into the dungeon, you explore, you come back, and there's just a whole bunch of months and months of downtime because you're healing up and buying stuff and building whatever, then the haste spell is going to unfortunately shorten some people's careers as they get aged out, as they get worse over time. That's just a really funny thing to consider is, yeah, the haste spell could save your life right now, but it could mean that you're forced to retire a little bit early. Now on to the adventure and combat list here. We're not even halfway through this book yet. Oh my goodness. But here we get the typical stuff of what is the adventuring party. Your hirelings, because hirelings are a big deal in these games. You need to have people by your side. You need to have the guide and the armor bearer and the pack handler and the teamster. And you need to hire the mercenaries if you're going against the crazy stuff. And once you eventually get to the realm section, you have to get the alchemist to do some great things. And you want to have people such as the seaman if you are going out on awesome world-shattering events or whatever. You get your henchmen and you check your henchman's loyalty. But here is something that I think that needs to be present in a lot of games is the adventure preparation. A checklist of what you need to do before you go out there into the world. Your characters are all in town. They need to go down this list. What do you have for the itinerary? What do you have for equipage? What hirelings do you have? What spells are prepared? What is the marching order? What are your guys' standard tactics what is the SOPs? Who's the caller right now? Who's going to be the mapper of the exploration and the dungeon and all that stuff? Those things are extremely important because you need to have all those things figured out. And we get the classic adventuring procedures of moving around and listening and, oh, you need to sleep. And if you are doing some sort of task and it's not there on your character sheet, then simply just roll for it if it's on D6. And if it's difficult, then you only have a 2 in 6 chance of succeeding, etc., things like that. Time is an extremely important aspect of the game here, and we get listed here that 1 round is 10 seconds and 1 turn is 10 minutes. So it's not that crazy instance of 6 seconds in a round, and it's not the absolute ridiculous thing of 1 minute per round. There is a lot of things going on here. We get listed what encumbrance does. Encumbrance is big in this game because not only does it slow you down your whole movement, but it also lowers your AC, and you do not want your AC lowered at all whatsoever. We get listed here, okay, if you have this sort of movement, how far can you move in the world? If you're going over smooth terrain, then guess what? Nothing gets affected. But if you're going over rugged terrain, then your movement is getting hindered completely. We see all of these variations on how far you can move because, of course, keeping track of all that is a big deal. And here we get the encounter. What happens once you finally get into a fight? Whether that be in the dungeon or whether that be in the wilderness. And here I want to show off more of this art. So right here, this is showing off the weird fantasy aspect. We get this dark knight on this horse bearing down on the party. The party is fighting off some savage peoples. But then also, we have a knight armed with a laser gun and they're getting ready to fire away. You know, just absolutely great stuff. I love it. You know, this game is a way to play a low fantasy game, but also have some weird sci-fi intermixed in between, but not make it feel too pervasive. We also get the classic reaction table. Hey, not every creature is going to fight right away. Roll 2d6. What is their disposition? Oh, I rolled a 9. They're friendly. You know, who are these people? We get into combat, the typical stuff here. So combat is a thing that is going to change from the 2nd edition to the 3rd edition. There is this big old list here, as we're going to be seeing here, that there is basically a difference between what rounds are, but it's going to be simplified in the 3rd edition, but you can run this perfectly fine. And of course here we get the combat matrix for all the fighting ability. If you are a person that has a high fighting ability, you're going to be able to hit people easier. Just makes sense. We get the attack roll modifiers, we get the armor class modifiers, just a whole bunch of very useful things here. More awesome art that really shows off what's going on in the world. We get surprise, we get action declaration, and here specifically is where we're seeing, you know, the combat sequence breakdown of phase 1 and phase 2. We get melee, missile, magic, and movement. And the reason why that's a big deal is because when you are a magic user, you have to declare right from the get-go that you're casting a spell, and everybody knows that you're casting a spell because you're waving your hands around, you're doing some incantation, and you're also not moving. If you declare that you're casting a spell and you take a 1 whole point of damage or more, then your spell is thrown away like it was spent and you didn't get to cast it. And of course that's a big deal because if you are not able to hit the magic user, then they're going to get off some spell and they may just very well kill you. There's a very, very nice in detail look about all this, and we get this big old chart too, but it may seem complicated, but it just really isn't. You know, you just roll up the round. Okay, it's your melee turn. Okay, now it's the enemy's melee turn. It's your missile turn. Now it's the enemy's missile turn. Very, very simple stuff here. But here is another reason why this game stands out amongst a whole bunch of other games, is the fact that we get more options than just I swing with my sword. We get a whole bunch of different things here on grappling, on overbearing the foes, about how to deal with mounted combat. Spear versus charge, you know, the classic, I set my spear, thus I'm going to be able to do other things. Missiles, firing into melee. Guess what? If you fire into melee, you might shoot your friend in the back. That might suck. Magic, you know, magic is very, very potent. We get this undead turning table here, but here is what I want to get into, advanced combat. This chart here shows off a bunch of cool things you can do. One of my most favorites right there in the beginning, arrow setting. The archer spikes his arrows into the ground, angled before him so he can gain a faster rate of fire. Preparation time is thus required. With his arrows so arrayed, a 3-2 rate of fire improves to a 2-1, a 2-1 improves to a 5, you know, just etc., etc. That is really cool because, hey, if I'm going to take some time, I can improve my rate of fire, but I need to be able to put my arrows into the ground in front of me, and I also have to, you know, be on a terrain that would allow me to do so. So am I going to sacrifice a whole 1 turn to then get a better firing rate over time? Heck yes, I'd be willing to. And a whole bunch of other great things. Double shot, arrows, disarming foes, ready shooter. So what's really cool is if you're walking around with a crossbow and you get into a fight with someone, before anything goes on, before even that first melee round there, the people with the crossbows can let loose their arrows, which is really cool. You can get a whole shot off right as combat starts. But, of course, there are some drawbacks to that. If you miss, then, of course, that was worthless. If you don't kill them, then they still might be coming after you. And you've got this crossbow in your hand, which is unloaded now. So are you going to then drop the crossbow? Are you going to try and load another one? That might take some time. I really like that. That does reward people for walking around with a whole bunch of crossbows, but at the same time, it could potentially punish them if they are very unlucky. Whole bunch of different, unique, awesome combat things here. Advanced combat, totally awesome. Two-weapon fighting, I always dig when people are trying to dual wield. Critical hits. So in a lot of OSR games, there is no such thing as crits. A natural 20 is just simply going to give you a guaranteed hit. In this game, however, there is a whole bunch of things with crits. As we saw with the monk, for example, on a 19 or a 20, they can do a stunning attack. But here in particular is where we get the critical hits. If you are a cleric, a thief, or the traditional monster, and you get a critical hit, then you roll d6. And on a 1 through 2, you do a +1 or +2 damage. If you roll that 4 to 5 there, you double the damage. And oh my goodness, if you roll that 6, then you triple the damage. Very, very swingy stuff there. The Magician, of course, barely shares in that. The best they can do is multiply the damage by 2. But we can see there, that's where the fighters reign supreme. The fighters are much more likely to double the damage or triple the damage. Really, really great stuff. And here it's finally detailed out what the saving throws are. We actually get, funnily enough, what happens if you are a 0 hit die creature. You have to actually roll a 17, which is very unlikely. But of course we can see here that as you progress over time, it just gets easier and easier. You know, awesome stuff. Also, really harkening back to days of old is there is item saving throws. If you get hit by some sort of attack or feature or whatever, then there is a possibility that the items that you are carrying on you are going to be destroyed or blow up or whatever. We also get some fun spell resistances, and here is where we get the damage. So this is not a system where when you drop to 0 HP, you are dead. You start the grisly process of dying once you reach -4 HP. At -4 HP and beyond, you start bleeding out for 1 HP per turn. Once you reach -10 HP is when you die. So if you are a level whatever character, you have, let's say 20 HP for example, and you take 23 points of damage, then guess what? You're not dying. You're simply just on the ground, unconscious, and someone can resuscitate you with some booze, and you are just pretty much barely ambulatory. You can move around, but you can't really do anything. You can't participate in combat, and all that fun jazz. There is some resurrection in this game. However, if you are resurrected, then there are some penalties, such as your con goes down by 1 permanently, all that fun stuff. HP is not coming back quickly at all. Every single day that you rest successfully, then you're going to simply roll for your class's hit die for your health back. Pretty good, but of course you cannot be out in the dungeon. It's not gonna work, right? You're just gonna get yourself killed. So there is that to note. You cannot be out in the wilderness. So what I really like about this game is the fact that it does mean that with this death and dying system, you are more likely to survive, which I really like. You know, if you don't like the drop to 0 HP, you're dead sort of event, this is a great way to have some more survivability. People are more likely to stick in and level up longer, which is pretty cool. We also get some instances of special damage, asphyxia, energy drain. Yes, there is energy drain from undead. Lycanthropy, madness, poisons. Oh, poisons are scary. And here's another thing that we love about the OSR, XP. So we get XP for slaying monsters, however, it's not that much. We get gaining treasure XP, clever use of an ability. Reward your players for being clever. We get 25 to 50 XP for clever use of an ability, 100 to 500 XP for problem solving, 500 to 1000 XP for completing adventures and campaign goals, and also, very importantly, is attendance. If you show up to the table, guess what? Then you get 25 to 50 XP. You know, that's awesome. That's definitely going to reward people that show up to the table consistently. Also, to really fixate on the weird fantasy here, we also get some aerial combat, because you could be riding some sort of dinosaur, or you could be on some sort of aerial vehicle, or whatever the case may be. Aerial combat, you know, you could be on a skyship. You know, that's really, really cool. We also get waterborne adventures. I love me some water, and there is a lot of awesome things we can do with that. Look at that. If you want to get on an Amazon crack, that's going to cost you 20,000 gold. But hey, guess what? It's got 5d6 hull points, which is really, really good. You know, so for reference here, hull points are worth way, way more than actual HP. They are two entirely separate things. And we get a nice list here on what all of these things are. We get a list here on what the wind is looking like when you're rolling out. What happens if someone's a man overboard? Guess what? If someone's in heavy armor, they're probably drowning. And unfortunate here. And oh, look at that. These people ran ashore and they're going up against giants, and the giants are throwing down some rocks. Pretty gnarly stuff. Icebergs, whirlpools. What happens if you get lost at sea? What happens if you're trying to evade people at sea? Oh man, you do not want to get involved with a whirlpool. That could spell disaster. Naval combat's always a great thing. We get these big old ballista, which require a crew, and we can, of course, ram people, because ramming people is totally awesome. You know, look at that. And if you get into a fight with some sort of large sea creature, you're going to have to figure out how the heck we're going to fight this thing. Oh, man, you really don't want to be fighting a sea creature like that, though, because it's probably going to jack you up. We, in fact, actually get some very, very distinct things here, like ore shearing. Great stuff. Oh, and underwater combat, because, hey, it's not a Splash of Cthulhu and Conanian if you don't have some underwater combat at some point in your venture. You know, you can fight underwater, but you're probably going to be a little bit worse at it. And here's another aspect I love, the domain play. Once you reach 9th level in your respective class, you are going to be able to build some sort of stronghold. And once you start building your own stronghold, you're going to have to consider all the costs. Look at that. It's going to cost you a lot of gold, and it's going to cost you a lot of time. These things take a tremendous amount of effort, but once you build it, they will come. Once you build that keep or church or whatever it is that you need to build, people are going to flock to you, and it's going to be great. And you're going to be seeing here, oh yeah, you know, people are going to be attacking us. Maybe we should build some windows that are barred, and we should build some arrow loops, and we should build a drawbridge. You know, I really love that. You just hand over a blank sheet of paper to your players and say, hey, build up your castle, and we'll see how much this is going to cost you. Really, really great. We get, of course, all the hirelings and mercenaries you're going to need. And, of course, there is warfare, because you can't have a keep and expect people not to try and attack it. We get this big old nice little thing here on dealing with combat, both attacking enemies and both for defending enemies from enemies. We get warfare casualties because, hey, if there's war, people are going to die. We get morale and troop movement and all this great stuff. And here it is, the Bestiary, because we can't have weird fantasy without weird creatures. Yes, you are going to go up against giant toad things. And, oh my goodness, I love this Bestiary. We start off with an aboleth, or okay, you know, it's going to be good when you start off with a crazy aboleth. But this abominable snowman, how creepy is that? These things are actually pretty scary in all things considered. I know, yeah, exactly. We go up against giant ants. Giant ants are totally awesome, especially these radioactive ants. Those things are incredibly strange. You get bit by one of those, and there's a chance that you could just die. Pretty gnarly stuff. Ape men. Oh, man, you don't want to go up against ape men. Ape men are crazy. And oh, look at this stuff. We get all these golem-type creatures, and you know, a bear. Who, you know, bears, bahirs, and black puddings. Oh, black puddings are really scary in this game. They destroy all manner of weapons in armor, including magical ones. Corrodes leather on contact. So if you have leather, then it's just gone right there. And metal in 2d4 rounds, including weapons and armor. Though magical metal survives 1 extra round per plus. If you got that +3 greatsword, then guess what? On that 2d4, oh yeah, your weapon survives a whole 70 more seconds. Oh man, that sucks. You see a black pudding, you run away. Dinosaurs, because wherever the heck that thing is, it's creepy. More and more great things here. Bestiaries that I absolutely adore. And why are we fighting all those creatures in that bestiary? It's to get to this treasure. And mind you, this treasure list is huge. It starts off on page 428 and ends at 492. You know we're getting a lot of good stuff here. And what's really good is not only are we getting a bunch of cool individual items, but we're getting these massive lists here on rolling for items. Because sometimes you want things to be completely autonomous and not tailor things to your party. You just want to roll things. And this game system allows you to do it. There are so many random tables in this book that allow you to roll for absolutely everything here. We're going to be seeing just all manner of magical items and gold and jewelry. And okay, let's take a look here. What do you find? Do you find rings, armor, shields, swords, other melee weapons, missile weapons, etc., etc. There is a ton of great things here. Let me just take a look at a Rod of Cancellation. The rod may be wielded by any character class. When touched to another magical item, it permanently drains all the properties of that item. It's just a big ol' FU to anybody that's got a magical item. Great stuff here. If you're going up against some certain type of foe and they're going to kill you, you might as well just, you know, try and ruin their day, right? And also showcasing off some of this weird sciencey things going on here. We have this horde of undead bearing down on the players, but hey, they've got some laser weaponry. Oh, but it looks like her weapon isn't working, perhaps, or maybe she's trying to reload it. I'm willing to bet that it's already drained and they just don't know how to use it. And finally, here at the back of the book, we get the Hyperborea Gazetteer. So, as mentioned here, and in showing case the map here, the world is this floating rock in the middle of space. It's not exactly the middle of space, exactly. It is specifically floating around a certain planet. And here we get all of the fine details, or at least not all of them, but a lot of them, about what's going on with this world, about what these people think of and what do they know. And very, very important here, we get this massive, massive calendar. So the creators of this book have gone through painstaking, and I do mean painstaking, observations on how the world would work. And as we're getting into, they have gone down to the minute detail of what sort of light one would expect if you were in this floating rock in the middle of space. So here, okay, on the if it's year 2, week 4 at let's say 1805, you know, just like golly, crazy daylight calendar here. You can go to this painstaking detail. I don't know if I would, but I know some people would find a great appreciation for that, and I think it's totally great that they've included it. And we also get some great notable events here about what's going on in this world. And we get the climate of the winter, spring, summer, and fall. What's going on with the deserts and the forest and the hills and the plains. This is not exactly the most pleasant world around. And the world reflects around that. One of my favorite aspects of the world building here is that located at the edges of the world are these weird obelisks. Most of them are just simply in the water, but one of them is actually located on land. And you could go up to them if you wanted to, but people don't exactly know what they are. You know, there's a lot of fun adventures you could be having with that. And here's another great adventure. You show up to a random island and you go up against a bunch of ape men armed with a whole bunch of swords. Really cool. Here we get a whole bunch of cool things of Yathaqua Plateau. You know, just more and more crazy world building. Well, look at this. The Witch Queen is doing something evil here. The City of Mask. Look, everyone has to wear a mask. That's really weird. You know, just I love this world building. We get a whole bunch of geographical features, and we get a whole bunch of fine details here, and we get a sense of the scope and scale of the world, about how there's these larger than life creatures and there's these mountains that are way too big to be explored. You know, just I love that sense of scope and scale in the world. Here we actually get, yeah, these great obelisks here. You know, like what the heck is it doing here? Most people would never see these things in a lifetime, but if you were willing to go out there and trying to see what's up, maybe you'll discover what it actually is. And look at that. Look at that. An ancient Atlantean astronaut is exploring around here, armed with this little ray gun. Cool, cool stuff. We get all the fun stuff on the religion there. Look at that. Who doesn't want to worship some good old Kraken, right? Who doesn't want to worship some Lanaqua or Mordezen, Raven, Real? Just the clash of cultures here is absolutely astounding. Actually, if you look more into the lore, you discover that a whole bunch of Romans are floating around somewhere around here, but most of the Romans have died out or been basically just infused with the other races of the world. More creepy stuff. The Ashen Worm. Ugh. Yeah, that reminds me of some Star Wars, you know? And the weather in Hyperborea. Oh my goodness. Look at this. More of these charts here to determine what the heck is going on in the world. How hot is it? How cold is it? Great, great stuff. Do you know of any other RPG system that has wind force and wind chill and seasonal modifiers like this? I can't think of any off the top of my head. Not to this extent, anyway. And look at this. Temperature conditions, modifiers, and extreme weathers, precipitation. Absolutely fantastic stuff. And here nearing the very end, we actually get a whole bunch of pre-made characters that you could potentially use or just to showcase off what characters are like. This person's got a +1 dagger and a +2 boomerang. That's actually really cool. This person's got a +2 small shield, so they're pretty awesome and tanky, you know. Really, really great showcasing of all of that. You know, more and more groups here. and the art just continues to suck me in. I love, love, love this stuff. And actually, near the very end, not only do we get all this contained in one book, we actually get an introductory setting and an introductory adventure. So the town of Swampgate is a great way of showcasing off what's there in the world. We get all of these NPCs, and we get all these rumors, and we get all these structures. We of course get the map, and we get all this great stuff. Really, really helping out, flesh out the world. This is just an example of what's going on. You can of course make your own, and there's actually a whole bunch of pre-made adventures for you to look up as well. Really great stuff. I highly recommend checking it out. Look at this, the Fields of Vol, really creepy stuff. The Black Moss Hag of Lug introductory adventure, really, really great, really creepy. Whole bunch of things going on here, and in fact, if you're actually running it at the right time, the characters are constantly getting harassed by flies. Pretty gross stuff. And what's really cool is the players get to interact with a whole bunch of weird things going around the worm caverns. As they explore around this dungeon, they'll see more and more creepy stuff like daemons and weird worms and worms of Ymir. Really, really creepy stuff here. Look at this. Imagine turning a corner and just seeing a whole bunch of people crawling around and clawing at you. Descendants of the Ninth. So as I mentioned before, there is a whole bunch of aspects of, there were Romans. These people in particular were part of a Roman legion. You know, really, really great world building. And the book ends much like it first started, with a whole bunch of fan-frickin-tastic art, really sucking you in. Right there, that constantly always reminds me of some Berserk stuff right there. Reminds me of, you know, some really terrible event. This book is absolutely amazing. I've ran a whole bunch of Astonishing Swordsmen Sorcerers of Hyperborea. It's absolutely great. I love the crunchiness of the game system, and I love the aspects of the world building. And I like how it's not exactly the traditional, it's not the norm. It is unique in its own right, and I love it for that. This game is a bit crunchier than the rules light stuff, so if you're into that sort of stuff, this is definitely something worth checking out. It's not the most complex setting. It's definitely not the most, as much as like some of those crazy charts there at the end there indicated. You don't need to have all of that. You can simply just run a traditional adventure. You can easily run pretty much anything that is OSR and just use this game setting, and it's going to work out great. Especially like I mentioned before with the health system. With the health system, PCs are going to survive a bit more often, which is really cool. You know, HP is a little bit higher in this game because a whole bunch of characters have D8s, D10s. Heck, there's even some D12 classes in there. So people are going to survive more often. You're going to get people that level up more. You're going to get more hirelings, henchmen, retainers, mercenaries, and go out and explore some more. You're eventually going to get a whole bunch of gold and get to that domain play, and it's going to be a great time. So if weird fantasy, Conanian, Cthulhu style world building and setting and rules, if that stuff appeals to you, I cannot recommend enough looking at Astonishing Swordsmen Sorcerers of Hyperborea. Absolutely great stuff. As mentioned before, as the time of this recording, it is in its second edition with this huge 600-page tome, but there will be a Kickstarter coming out, and it's going to introduce a lot more stuff, which is really, really great. I can't wait to see what's going on with that, and I can't wait to see how you guys respond to this. I'm curious to see how many people have already delved into Hyperborea, and I'm curious to see how many people are actually willing to give it a try. It's really awesome. I can't recommend enough, and I can't wait to see what you all have to say about it. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening, and thank you to my amazing patrons. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.